Shalom, shalom, Israel. Brother Shatar speaking. And of course, we're giving our honor and glory to Yahweh Yahweh Shah. So without further ado, we're going to get into the topic. So the topic today is going to be dealing with the commandments. The commandments been here since the very beginning. Since the Lord made the earth and made the heavens, or the case may be, the commandments have always been here. We don't just read the book of Genesis and then get to Exodus. Now Moses meeting the Lord up in Mount Sinai, receiving the tables of stone and not giving it to the people of Israel. No, the commandments been here for, since the very beginning. Our forefather Adam had the commandments. Noah, Shem, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Our forefathers had the commandments since the very beginning. But to understand that the commandments were here since the very beginning, we first have to deal with our forefather Adam, the chosen Adam. So I'm going to get the book of Genesis, and I'm going to start at verse 7. Really, I'm going to start at 1 and 27 real quick. Because when the Lord, like a lot of people think that it was just Adam and Eve that populated the whole entire earth at this time. But no. At that time, every man was just referred to as Adam at that time. Because we know in Genesis 1 and 27, and I'm going to go ahead and read this right now. So, but we know in Genesis 1 and 27, well, I'm going to just read it. It's like it, Israel. All right, so God created man in his image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. So in the beginning, the Most High created male and female. So when you get to chapter 2 in Genesis, now you think it's just one male and one female. No. That just goes to show the lack of understanding that these people have when dealing with this Bible. So he said in the beginning he made male and female. He didn't just make one male and one female. Just like he didn't make one fowl of the heaven, or the one fowl of the air, one creepy thing, one beast of the earth. He made them in a mass abundance. So just like he made those things in a mass abundance, the same thing he did with the male and female. So I'm gonna read verse 28. So and God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moved upon the earth. So when the Most High made male and female, he told them to be fruitful and multiply. So why would you think chapter 2 come, it's just Adam and Eve, when he told them in the beginning to be fruitful and multiply, when he already made many males and many females? So if they being fruitful and multiplying, hey, it's not just one male and one female at this time. So when you actually get to chapter 2, it's actually speaking on the chosen Adam. Because every man at that time was referred to as Adam. And I'm going to read Genesis 5 and 1 just to prove that. Alright, so this is the book of Genesis, chapter 5 and verse 1. This is the book of the generations of Adam in the day that God created man. In the likeness of Yahweh made he him. So at that time, everybody was made Adam, or called Adam. Just like Eve, everybody was called, every female was called Eve at that time. Or the case may be. But every man was referred to as Adam. So to understand that the commandments was here from the beginning, going back to what I was saying earlier, we got to deal with the chosen man, Adam, our forefather. So this is Genesis chapter 2 and verse 7. This is the rise or the chosen man, Adam. Because the Lord always had a chosen man or a chosen people. So to understand, once again, that the commandments been here from the beginning, we got to get into the role of the chosen Adam. Because the role of the chosen Adam is the same role that the nation of Israel bear today, being the Lord's chosen people. So let's read. This is the book of Genesis chapter 2 and verse 7. And the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So right, just to clear the air on this real quick, when you read the book of Genesis, especially the first couple chapters, it's got a lot of dark sayings or parables. It's not just like something you can look at and understand the first time you see it, or the case may be. A lot of things are got a double meanings. It's twofolded. So right, I'm gonna read verse 7 again. So when it says, and the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground, we understand that the Lord made man of the dust of the ground. That's why we have pigmentation. That's why we got even the minerals and things of that nature found in the soil or in the ground. most of our body is contained of all of those things, because we was formed from the dust of the ground. But what this is saying, because this is going into the chosen man Adam, when it's saying the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, meaning he brought Adam from his lowest estate, from the bottom of the bottom. Hey, we hear this in the world, like people be like, I got it out the mud, I came from nothing, I'm from the dust, I'm from the bottom of the bottom. Hey, that's the same thing with Adam. He said, hey, he brought Adam, he brought Adam from the dust of the ground, from the bottom of the bottom, and put him on high, and gave him a position of authority, of power. So this is verse 7. And the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. So right, on the corner level, Adam was, he was alive, he was living. He could walk, or the case may be talk, or the case may be. But when he said, and man became a living soul, or he breathed Salaki. I'm going to start from the second part of the verse. And so it said, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. That breath of life is actually referring to the commandments. Adam was given the commandments right then and there, and he became a living soul. The Lord said in Proverbs 7:2, keep my commandments and live. So for Adam to become the living soul, he had to receive the commandments. But it's going, as we continue to read, it's going to continue to further prove itself, going into his role and what he had to do upon the earth at that time, during his time. So I'm going to get 2 precepts just actually showing you what that breath is. So I'm going to get my apocrypha. I'm going to get Wisdom of Solomon, and I'm going to start at, I'm going to go to chapter 7. I'm going to read verse 23 or 24. I'm going to start at verse 24. For wisdom is more moving than any motion. She passeth and goeth through all things by reason of her pureness. For she is the breath of the power of God, and a pure influence, flowing from the glory of the Almighty. Therefore can no defiled thing fall upon her. So wisdom, it said wisdom, she is the breath of the power of God. So that breath represents the commandments, the wisdom, the understanding. That's what Adam received at this time, and he became a living soul. But let's get another precept. I'm going to get Job, I believe, chapter 33. So like, yeah, this is the book of Job, chapter 33 and verse 4. The Spirit of God hath made me, and the breath of the Almighty hath given me life. So right, just like we read in Genesis 2:7. He formed man of the dust of the ground, which is something that actually happened, and it's correlating with this verse, Job 33:4. The Spirit of God hath made me. So right, we understand that the Most High made us. But going into the second half of the verse, he said, breathing into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. It also correlates with this verse, and it says, Job 33:4, and the breath of the Almighty hath given me life, because that's what Adam received, life, the commandments, the wisdom, the knowledge, and the understanding. That's what Adam received during this time. Like I said earlier, going back to Proverbs 7:2, the Lord said, keep my commandments and live. That's what Adam had at this time. But it's going to continue to further prove itself as we continue to read. So this book of Genesis, and I'm going to start from verse 7 and continue. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Just going into the chosen Adam. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight, and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So right, you have the tree of life, and you have the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So this is verse 10. And the river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted, and became into 4 heads. The name of the first is Pison. That is was compassed the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the unkstone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that compasses the whole land of Ethiopia. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel. That is which goeth toward the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates. So it's giving you the general vicinity, or the biblical location, or where the land of, or where the Garden of Eden was at. So the Garden of Eden was located roughly, or like by modern day, Asia, in that area, or in the ancient times, We get into where Abraham is from, by Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, over in that area where the Ur of Chaldees is, that general vicinity, or the case may be, if y'all understand. So that's where the Garden of Eden was located. That's where everything started at. That's where everything began. So this is verse 15. So this was Adam's role that he had in the Garden of Eden. So, and the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. So that was Adam's role, to dress it and to keep it. So let's say if you got a literal garden, you gotta dress and keep your garden. You gotta make sure you gotta make sure your plants are the right distance apart, so their roots won't become tangled, or the case may be. You gotta make sure they receive the right amount of water, the right amount of sunlight for them to prosper and continue to grow, or the case may be. You had to dress it into, you had to dress and keep your garden, Salakia. So that's the same thing Adam had to do, but with the people or the other nations. Adam had to dress and keep the people, meaning he had to establish order. He had to teach the people commandments. He had to make sure everything was done decently and in order. That was his role upon the earth, to get the other nations in line. It wasn't just Adam at this time, or the case may be. When you get the understanding, Salakia, it was 3 categories of men at this time before the flood and all those things happened, those events, and there was 18 nations established. But at first you had the sons of God, which would be going into the chosen Adam, Noah, all of them, that they was the sons of God. Then you had the children of men, which are today the other nations, Ham, Moab, Ammon, and then you had the sons of the wicked. And we know who that is. The sons of the wicked is Esau today, but back then it was your spiritual Canaanites, or it was the Canaanites, because the Canaanites possessed the same spirit back then that Esau got today. Not trying to get too deep. So verse 15, and the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. So that's what Adam wrote, to get the other nations in order. So just like Adam rose to do that, that's also our role as a nation, being Israel, to get the other nations in order when Yahweh shall make his second return. So first you start with us getting our nation in order, sealing the 144,000, the elect. And then when Yahweh shall make his second return, he gonna round all of us up, and we gonna round up all these other nations and get them in order. So it's the same thing. The Lord always had a chosen seed line ever since the beginning. Let me get Genesis just to further prove that he always had a chosen seed line of men that he was dealing with. And it started with the chosen man Adam. So let me get Genesis. I believe it's chapter 33. A little bit. I'm slow on the sword, man. Genesis 33, or not 33. Genesis chapter 31. Yeah, this is the book of Genesis chapter 31 and verse 51. So, and Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt me and thee. Verse 2. This heap be a witness, and this pillar be witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt no more pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. So, hey, Jacob and Laban, they was making a covenant between each other, or the case may be. So, verse 53. The God of Abraham. So we understand that the Most High was the God of Abraham. Because we know the lineage go through the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But before he was the God of Abraham, who is he the God of? So I'm going to read verse 53. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judged between us and Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. So right before God was the God of Abraham, he was the God of Nahor, Abraham's grandfather, not his brother, but Abraham's grandfather. He was God of him, God of Nahor. So the Lord always had a chosen seed of men that he was dealing with. So before he was the God of Salakia, brain fart. But before he was the God of Abraham, he was the God of Nahor. But before he was the God of Nahor, we know he was the God of Shem in Genesis 9. So I'm going to get that real quick. Alright, so this is the book of Genesis chapter 9 and verse 26. And he said, blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. So, hey, before he was the God of Nahor, Abraham's grandfather, he was the God of Shem. So, right, when you get to Genesis, specifically chapter 11, and you start at verse 10, it start from Shem's line to Abraham. And really, I'm gonna read a couple lines just to show you real quick. So this is the book of Genesis chapter 11 and verse 10. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he begat Arphaxad 500 years and begat sons and daughters. And Arphaxad lived 530 years and begat Salah. And Arphaxad lived after he begat Salah 403 years and begat sons and daughters. And Salah lived 30 years and begat Eber. And Salah lived after he begat Eber 403 years and begat sons and daughters. So I'm not going to read all the way through, but this is Shem lines all the way into Abraham. This is the chosen seed line. Because as you just noticed from the examples in these verses, once Shem begat Arphaxad, he had other sons and daughters. But it only mentioned Arphaxad because after Shem, Arphaxad, he was the god of Arphaxad after he was the god of Shem. And after Arphaxad was the god of Salah. Then on and so forth and so forth. So he was the god of these seed of men all the way up into Abraham. Okay, so it was Adam, Abel. Abel was replaced by Seth, Noah. Then Shem was chosen out of Ham and Japheth. It was Shem, and then all the way into Abraham. This is the direct line. So when you read Genesis 11, chapter 11, and you start at verse 10 on down, it gives you the line to all the way into Abraham, or the chosen seed of men who the Lord been dealing with, where the case may be. So we're gonna go back to Genesis and get into and continue with Adam's role. It's like I said earlier, to understand that the commandments was here from the beginning, we gotta understand Adam's role. So we already understand that the birth of life was the commandments, the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that what Adam received. And we know in verse 15, he was put in the Garden of Eden to dress and to keep it. Just like our role today. We dressing to keeping the nation of Israel right now, trying to get our nation in order and teach them the law, statutes, and commandments. So that's what Adam was doing at that time, teaching the other nations and getting them in order. So that's what so that's the correlation right there. And that was his role upon the earth. So I'm gonna jump to verse we're gonna get further into his role to understand that the commandments was here from the beginning. So I'm gonna jump to verse 22. Well, I'm gonna start at 21, why not? So, and it reads, and the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept, and took one of his ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man made he a woman and brought her unto the man. So that don't actually mean that the Lord performed surgery, got the scalpel, went to slicing and dicing on Adam, took one of his ribs for real, and made a whole woman out of her. When we know in the beginning, that Yahweh, he made male and female. So that can't be what that's talking about, or the case may be. So what's that actually saying? I'm going to read verse 23 before I actually explain it. So I'm going to start from verse 22 again. I'm going to read verse 23. So in the rib which the Lord Yahweh had taken from man, made he a woman and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, and she should be called woman because she was taken out of man. So right, all the Most High did when he brought Adam this woman was raise up a woman or get a woman of close kindred to Adam, of his own nation, of his own people, or the case may be. That's all that means. When Adam said, this is now bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, that's all he did. He brought him a woman of close kindred. He didn't make literally make a whole new woman. When we know male and female was created in the beginning. It wasn't just them two. We already understand that. We already destroyed that. So that's all that means. He got him a woman of close kindred, and we're gonna prove that, and prove that that's what bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh actually mean. So I'm gonna get Genesis chapter 29, and I'm gonna read verse 14. So this is the book of Genesis chapter 29 and verse 14. I'm gonna start at verse 13. So and it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him into his house. And he told Laban all these things. Verse 14. And Laban said to him, surely there are my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month. So Laban told Jacob, surely there are my bone and my flesh. He was just letting him, You my people. You my kinfolk, what they say in the world. You my kinfolk. You my kin. You my you know, whatever you want to call it, brother, cousin, or the case may be. So that's all that's talking about. Those are the same people, or the same kindred. When he referred to Eve as bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, he raised up a woman of his own kindred, his own people. And I'm gonna get another precept, and that in itself is a law right there. Hold on, I'm gonna do it in a little bit, but let me get a precept real quick. Alright, so after Joshua is Judges. So this is the book of Judges, chapter 9 and verse 2. Yeah, Judges chapter 9 and verse 2. And I'm gonna start at 1. So, and Abimelech the son of Jerubbaal went to Shechem unto his mother's brethren and communed with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, so right, Abimelech went to his mother's brethren, basically his people, and he spoke with them, saying, this is verse 2 now, speak, I pray you, in the ears of all men of Shechem, whether it is better for you, either that all the sons of Jerubbaal, which are 70 persons, reign over you, or that one reign over you. Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. So he tells them, hey, remember, I'm your people. I'm your bone and your flesh. I'm your kindred. I'm your kinfolk. I'm of your own people, your nation. He told them, remember. So that's all that means. So Adam, or the Lord gave Adam a wife of his own people, of his own kindred. And that's showing you that was a law even back then, that Adam took a wife of his own people, of his own kindred. Let's show you that that's in the law. I'm gonna get Deuteronomy. I'm gonna start at this chapter 7 and verse 3. Yeah, chapter 7 and verse 3. This is the book of Deuteronomy. It's like it is. I'm a little bit slow on the sword for some reason. Let me see. Alright, so this is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 7, and I'm gonna start at verse 3. So it say, neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son. For they would turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you and destroy thee suddenly. Hey, so even contained in the law, the Lord told you, don't deal with the women or the men of the other nations. So don't deal with the woman if you're an Israelite man, and don't deal with the men if you're an Israelite woman. Of the other nations, don't deal with them. This is contained in the law. So even back then, that was a law. Adam took a wife of his own kindred, of his own people, of close kin. That's what happened. Hey, even Tobit's father told Tobit, hey, chiefly take a wife of thine own kindred, of thine own people, of thine own seed, because that's a law. You don't want to be dealing with the women of other nations, because just like I just read, it would turn your heart away from the Lord. So that's what Adam did. So let's go back to Genesis chapter 2. Let's further deal with Adam. So right, I'm gonna read verse 23 again. So we already understand that that's not talking about he performed surgery on Adam and made a woman out of a rib when one was already made. It's just saying he brought up a woman of close kindred to Adam and gave him to be his wife, which is also contained in the law, further proving that the law is here from the beginning. So this is verse 23. I'm going to read that again. I'm going to continue on down. So when Adam said, this is not bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, she should be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they both were naked, and the man and his wife were not ashamed. So right, this is the first marriage. So it's saying they were both naked, verse 25, and the man and his wife were not ashamed. So right, it don't actually mean that they was naked, butt naked, no clothes on, or the case may be. Just like Esau like to depict, they just had an apple that was naked, it's a snake wrapped around them, or the case may be. No, it wasn't like that. When he said it was naked and were not ashamed, meaning they didn't have knowledge of sin. They only knew good. Going back to Romans 7 and 12, I'm gonna get that real quick. That's all they knew, because Adam, he was given the commandments. And being Adam was given the commandments, by default, Eve was given the commandments. Because as a man or as a husband, you're supposed to dwell with your wife as a weaker vessel. You're supposed to dwell with her according to knowledge, right? So this is the book of Romans chapter 7 and verse 12. Wherefore the law is holy and the commandment holy and just and good. So that's all Adam knew. They only knew what was just and what was good. They only knew righteousness. They only knew the commandments. So when it's saying they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed, they mean, hey, they didn't have no knowledge of sin or of evil. They only knew good. But let's show you that the word naked means being in sin. Well, first I'm gonna jump down to verse I'm gonna jump to verse 6, and I'm gonna read to verse 7, and then I'm gonna show you what naked means and go back and deal with all of that. So this is the book of Genesis chapter 3 now, and we have verse 6. So, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree to be desired to make one wise. So this, hey, when she's talking about, when it's dealing with this apple, it's not talking about no a literal apple that you bite into, that you actually get off a tree. Because an apple can't make one wise. This is actually talking about the doctrines and the philosophies of the other nations, or the case may be. So, I'm going to read from the top again, verse 6. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. So they both, when the serpent came unto Eve, Salakia, when the serpent came unto Eve, hey, he beguiled her, and she took of his doctrines and philosophies, or the case may be, and also went to Adam and taught Adam of the serpent ways, or the case may be. So verse 7, and the eyes of them were both open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. So when it's saying the eyes of them were open and they knew that they were naked, it just simply means that they knew that they was in sin. But let's prove and go through the precepts showing that naked means being in sin. So I'm gonna get the book of Exodus chapter, I believe 32 and verse 25. Let's get there.